Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Just to remind you that this Saturday, Main Speak is at the Intercontinental. We serve breakfast from 9:30 a.m. and we start at 10 sharp. I look forward to hosting Joshua Oigara, with whom I had dinner last night, and most enjoyable conversation, I must say. He's going to be a very inspirational speaker. We previously hosted him when he was taking over from Dr. Martin Otieno. That link is on Rich Wrap-Ups as well. That was in 2012, December, and he's now been at the helm more than 18 months, and there's been a lot that's happened and a lot to speak about. There's a link around what is Mindspeak on Rich Wrap-Ups again, and also a link to the previous Mindspeak sessions this year, which have included, of course, Christine Lagarde, Dr. Naikuni, Charles Ireland, Dr. Richard Sesibera, and Munir Ahmed. My home thoughts start with this picture. The trees salute the sunset. The sunset salutes the trees, and we salute both of them. A chap called Mehmet Murat Ilden quotes, and it's a lovely picture. And then took me back to the visit we made 926 days ago, in point of fact, to the Fairmont in the Mara, and we had this bush dinner, and suddenly out of nowhere these Maasai came, and it was quite alarming, frankly. And then they danced, and it was really an extraordinary experience, and I took a short video, and that's there as well. If you get a chance, do have a look at it. A friend of mine on Twitter sent me a link to some of the first selfies. One was the first space selfie by Buzz Aldrin on Gemini 12 mission in 1966, so there you go. And another selfie is of Hunter S. Thompson on the road to Tijuana in the 1960s. And that took me to some of his famous sayings. Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, "Wow, what a ride!" Then and a couple of others. The edge. There is no honest way to explain it, because the only people who really know where it is, are the ones who have gone over. I like this one. It was like falling down an elevator shaft and landing in a pool full of mermaids. And the final one is, buy the ticket, take the ride. David Rudisha tweeted, the BBC has tweeted that they've got a story about David Rudisha, 100 Seconds to Beat the World, the David Rudisha story, and really is a remarkable story. Political reflections, let me start with Mira Bar Hillel in The Independent. All you now need is a mobile phone and a Twitter account to hold power to account and help change history. What a difference a few years of developing technology can make. The Gaza atrocities are now being reported on a constant basis by eyewitnesses, be they professional correspondents representing major organizations or amateur locals under fire, because all you need is a mobile phone and a Twitter account. It is those devices which brought us heart-rending images, some too horrific to be shown on television, of children with their limbs or half a head blown off, children covered in shrapnel wounds screaming for dead parents, surviving parents carrying tiny bodies, sights which caused the battle-hardened BBC correspondent Lise Doucette to sob during a live broadcast. They are all on Twitter now, should you care to look. This is the shape of wars to come. Anything less than total nuclear annihilation will, from now on, be recorded for posterity by the victims as well as the victors in their own versions. But far more importantly, aggressors will have to live with the consequences of their acts, unable to hide behind hollow rhetoric. And she concludes by saying the Israeli army is getting more resistance online than on the ground. It's not used to it and cannot cope. And I concluded by saying, with regard to narrative shaping, post-Gaza 2014 marks an inflection point, in my opinion. Then I like this tweet from Skyzine. So 7 camels just trotted down the road along Gaza's beach alone. Even they are looking for a way out. Maplecroft Risk have released a report saying that global terrorism fatalities are up 30%. Risk of attacks increase most in China, Egypt, Kenya, and Libya. Over the last 12 months, global fatalities from acts of terrorism have risen 30% compared to the previous 5-year average, according to Maplecroft, which identifies China, Egypt, Kenya, and Libya as seeing the most significant increases in the risk of terrorist attacks. Maplecroft Terrorism Security Dashboard is a new interactive mapping platform. Draws on Maplecroft's 7 years of global data to reveal terrorism and security trends across 197 countries. Globally, the MTSD recorded 18,668 fatalities in the 12 months prior to July 1st, up 29.3% from an annual average of 14,433 for the previous 5 years. So you can see a big surge. Classifies 12 countries as extreme risk. These include Iraq, most at risk, Afghanistan second, Pakistan third, Somalia fourth, Yemen sixth, Syria seventh, Lebanon ninth, Libya 10th. However, of particular concern for investors, the important growth economies of Nigeria 5th, the Philippines 8th, Colombia 11th, and Kenya 12th also feature in the category. Rising risks and economic costs in China, Egypt, Kenya, and Libya. Libya, Kenya, and Egypt are among a handful of countries to witness a significant increase in risk in the MTSD, and investor confidence in key sectors including tourism and oil and gas has been hurt. When faced with rising security costs and decreasing safety for their personnel, companies can and do reconsider their country-level commitments. Talking about the attacks in the Sinai Peninsula, reducing tourist numbers by 20% in May compared to the same month last year. Tourism in Kenya, which accounts for roughly 12.5% of GDP, has also been hard hit. We know all about that. Al-Shabaab, June 2014 represented the bloodiest month since the Westgate Mall attack on 21st September 2013, with 69 fatalities and at least 7 wounded. A single Al-Shabaab attack on Pekatoni village in Lamu County on 15th June was responsible for 48 of those deaths. The MTSD also reveals that the attacks are on the rise in China. Talking about Iraq, rated as the highest risk country. Boko Haram has seen Nigeria 5th record by far the highest number of fatalities per attack, reflecting the intensity of the violence there. Dynamic nature of terrorism means individual events are impossible to predict. And I'll put up an image of the Maplecroft Terrorism and Security Dashboard, and then remind you of that piece I wrote on the 19th of May, The Dashboard is Blinking Amber. And that link is on Rich Wrap-Ups. And I also wrote on the 22nd of April, the new set of risks are geopolitical risks. And this was, most of the attention is to the question of what's happening in the Ukraine, relationship between Russia and the US, flaring again. Also pointed to the geopolitical risks in the Middle East, what's happening in Syria, terms of the relationship between China and Japan. So there are geopolitical risks that are a bit more on the radar screen than in past years, and given the fragility of recovery, they're more salient than might otherwise be. This is the IMF's David Lipton in April. And I was saying, from his comments, we can appreciate that there are multiple theaters, spillover risks that remain. I talked about the MISEX, the Syrian pound collapsing, impact on Chinese and Japanese markets of a serious collision, saying getting caught up in the crossfire of geopolitical uncertainty not only decimates lives, but decimates your wealth. talking about the Arab Spring, about Mohammed Bouazizi, saying while most states have an overwhelming monopoly on the instruments of violence, what we now know is there are moments when the state's monopoly counts for naught. Just ask Ben Ali, who fled to Saudi Arabia with his wife. Then I quoted Kapuscinski, Shah of Shahs. All books about all revolutions begin with a chapter that describes the decay of tottering authority or the misery and sufferings of the people. They should begin with a psychological chapter, one that shows how a harassed, terrified man suddenly breaks his terror, stops being afraid. This unusual process, sometimes accomplished in an instant like a shock or a lustration, demands illuminating. Man gets rid of fear and feels free. Without that, there would be no revolution. It is authority that provokes revolution. This occurs when a feeling of impunity takes root among the elite. We are allowed anything. We can do anything. This is a delusion, but it rests on a certain rational foundation. For a while it does indeed look as if they can do whatever they want, scandal after scandal, illegality after illegality go unpunished, the people remain silent. They are afraid and do not yet feel their own strength. At the same time they keep a detailed account of the wrongs, which at one particular moment are to be added up. The choice of that moment is the greatest riddle of history. And I said, coming to Africa, we have to accept the geopolitical risks have ratcheted higher. At a macro level, the US and China are, in my view, in a conflictual relationship on the continent. As we drill further down to the micro level, we can see from South Sudan, where I cannot see how either side can win this decisively, to places like CAR, a significant deterioration. This comment by the leader of Nigeria's Boko Haram Islamists, Abu Bakr Shekau, caught my attention. We are in your city, he said, addressing Nigeria's President Goodluck Jonathan. That comment could have been made by the Al-Shabaab. Both Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab represent a risk that David Lipton did not touch on, that being asymmetric risks. The recent bombings in Abuja and last year's attack on Westgate confirm the potency of asymmetric risks. African markets have taken these risks in their stride. They might stumble if these asymmetric risks ratchet higher. And I still stand by that. And the resilience of the market speaks volumes about what is, I think, a secular allocation by international funds into Africa, which is underpinning these markets through a lot of interference. The AFP Africa says China sealed off a city after a man died of a bubonic plague, and then posted what must be the bacteria of bubonic plague, which caught my attention. New Yorkers asking, can John Kerry stop the bloodshed? But at least we know he too sees it for what it is. The euro 134.67, that softened up in part, I think, because of Russia. Dollar index, that's moving towards the top of the range, 80.77. Japanese yen 101.42. Swissy 0.9024. The Aussie through 94 and how at 0.9437. This is a chart breakout. India rupee sitting where it has been for a while, 60.165. South Korean won 10.2271. The Rial 221.32. Egyptian pound 7.1488. And the South African rand firmer at 10.5694. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the euro dollar and just say it looks as if it's softening up. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart of that. That's firming up towards the top of the range. And then I'll also put up a 1-month chart of the Aussie dollar. That's quite a significant move above 94, as you can see. Coca-Cola reported quarterly results. Revenue fell 1.4% to $12.6 billion in the period ended June 27, they said. Gold, I'm going to put up a 1-month chart, 1307.45. I think that's going to break down below 1300 any moment and does not trade with enough conviction in my view. Crude oil at 102, great bargain below 100. Let's see how we trade around here. We might even get another chance to buy it. It's just below 100 again. Chinese customs data Monday show that Iranian oil imports in the first 6 months of 2014 was 630,000 barrels a day, up 48% from the same period last year. Coming to sub-Saharan Africa, it started on Twitter, but then BBC caught up with the story. Heavy gunfire was heard around the military barracks of presidential guards in Kinshasa, the capital of the DRC. Residents were evacuated from the area around Camp Chachi, an army spokesman said. The reason for the shooting is still unclear. And then coincidentally, members of a DRC rebel group, the Union of Nationalists for Renewal, who are accused of plotting to overthrow the government. So the coincidence of the two events might be important. Of President Kabila, wait for the judge to arrive in the North Gauteng High Court. This photo is by Maasai, and so I suppose the coincidence of those two there might be more to it. I'll put up a photograph of Congolese soldiers riding on their pickup truck towards the state television headquarters in the capital Kinshasa. That photograph was from December 30th, 2013. The Africa CEO Forum have produced a report, The Private Sector, Driving Force of Africa's Growth. Do have a look. That document is on Rich Wrap-Ups and making some interesting points about Africa. According to the World Bank, 19 of the 36 most fragile states in the world are currently to be found in Africa. Level of internet access across the continent has reached a mere 18% of the population, but obviously Kenya is a bit of an outlier in that. They've got 10 priority areas for consideration and action. Do have a look at that, it's pretty interesting. South African all share popped 0.99% higher yesterday, still just a whisker below 52,000. It's up 12.268% this year. I wrote on the 7th of April, before the ratings agencies downgraded South Africa, and that was when I was visiting with RMA. And I concluded my piece by saying, Nigeria, rebasing or not, South Africa plays a heavyweight role in sub-Saharan Africa. And in my view, the economy is stabilized. It's trundling along at the bottom, but I don't think it's getting any worse. And I stick by that view. And I'll put up a photograph of the Johannesburg sunset that I took in the hotel in which we were staying. And it was a Friday night, and obviously very popular with the Afrikaners. And I suddenly found myself in this sort of, if you think of different tribes, this was an African tribe at the edge of the world, edge of the continent. It was quite extraordinary being embedded in that for that evening. Dollar Rand, that's stronger, of 10.5692, beginning to look firmer. South Africa's Kyalami Formula One Grand Prix racetrack is to be auctioned. This is according to Bloomberg. This is where Formula One drivers such as Michael Schumacher, Ayrton Senna competed in Grand Prix races, reckoned to fetch about $18.8 million in a July 24 auction. That's the reserve price. There is a possibility that a developer will buy it. I was there. And I'm sure, 178-acre property north of Johannesburg. That's pretty going to get people pretty interested. Kyalami remains an iconic name around the world in motorsport, South Africa spokesman Jaco Dazel said. Motorsport South Africa therefore hopes that the circuit finds the right buyer with an agenda of restoring it to its former glory. I visited the Kyalami racetrack 108 days ago with the people from Jaguar Land Rover. That was a fantastic experience, and I got to drive a Jaguar, and I'll put it up, the one I drove, and that persuaded me to buy one. And it really is a fabulous car, and the roads there are so good, so you can drive it at top speed. Egyptian pound is at 714.86, where we've been for eternity. The Egyptian stock market popped 1.08% high yesterday. That takes it to plus 26.26% this year, in Africa's best. Nigerian stock market shaved off 0.28%. That's up 3.23% in 2014, but is at 2008 highs. Nigeria's president, Goodluck Jonathan, finally met for the first time parents of the girls abducted by militant Islamists 100 days ago. And then Maplecroft is saying Nigeria has the world's highest casualty rate from terrorism, with an average of 24 deaths per attack out of 146 recorded in the year through June. John Dramani Mahama tweeted on July 17th, "The darkest hour is before the break of a new dawn. We would begin to see the effects of economic recovery by the end of 2014. But he has proven extremely he hasn't moved anyone in key roles in the government. The Ghana stock market is up 8.065% this year, shaved off 0.18% yesterday. But bear in mind the currency has now tumbled more than 33% this year, and that for me is the biggest signifier of all. Sub-Saharan Africa's biggest oil producers in shadowy state deals with Swiss commodity traders. The Natural Resource Governance Institute saying that Sub-Saharan Africa's top 10 oil-producing countries have sold more than $254 billion in crude through their state-owned oil companies over the past 3 years, equivalent to 56% of their combined government revenues. And clearly, I think they're selling them at steep discounts. Trafigura is a very, very big buyer. The World Bank projects that Kenya's GDP will grow 4.7% a year in 2014 and 2015. We knew this, but they put out a bit more granularity. The economy grew by just 2.7% in the first quarter of 2014, mainly as a result of delayed rain. IMF, however, is saying that there's been a lot of lending to the manufacturing sector, and they're expecting that engine to pick up speed. CCTV footage seen by the Star in one of the banks raided during the attack at Peketoni on June 15th and 16th shows a white woman in military jungle fatigues leading the operations. That takes me back to September 2013 when I wrote a piece, Reflections on Westgate Market Samantha Luthwaite. And I'm talking about her saying, subsequently she fell off or below the intelligence radar. In 2011 she reappeared in Kenya, Tanzania and South Africa, and apparently Somalia. On Friday, Kenya requested Interpol to issue a red notice for Samantha Luthwaite on charges of being in possession of explosives and conspiracy to commit a felony dating back to December 2011. I said, that's the background. Let's jump to Westgate. As I scanned the Al-Shabaab tweets, I recalled this one that Georgina Goodwin retweeted. Westgate, 14-hour standoff, relayed in 1,400 rounds of bullets and 140 characters of vengeance and still ongoing. Good morning, Kenya. Another read, here are two of the Mujahideen inside Westgate Mall, unruffled, strolling around the mall in such sang-froid manner. I kept thinking to myself, sang-froid, such an unusual word. It means coolness of mind, calmness, composure, a kind of cold-bloodedness under pressure. And therefore I'm putting Samantha Luthwaite at the scene, or just outside, because I saw some intelligence reports saying whoever was tweeting from that account was tweeting within the vicinity. At the scene, and I think she live tweeted from inside Westgate, or as just explained, for an as yet undetermined period. And I think she signaled her presence. And you see that in the linguistics. I'll put up an image of Westgate taken 302 days ago. I tweeted Fairmont, Mount Kenya, or they tweeted me. It reminded me of what a wonderful place it is, and I'll put up a photograph where you can see Mount Kenya from the slopes of Mount Kenya Safari Club. Kenya shilling a little bit softer, 87.901. Nairobi All Share up 10.332% this year, down 0.2% yesterday. NSE 20 down 0.29% yesterday, down 0.893% this year. A little bit circumspect, disappointing, but I think it's just transmission. We haven't seen the $2 billion of liquidity really hit the equity market yet, but it's going to come. NSE is valuing itself at 2 billion shillings as it opens a sale of its own shares. That's today. I'm just going to pop over that and see the opening ceremony. It was a pleasure catching up with Andrew Ali, and I interviewed him. He's of the Africa Finance Corporation in Nigeria. Do have a look at the link. It's on the website if you'd care to have a look. I caught up with him and made him take a selfie with me. And then I've also done an interview with Pradeep on the same day as I interviewed Andrew, and have a look at that. It gives you a few insights into Arthur River Cement and into the cement industry. Very interesting piece on PBS.org, photo essay, Sex and Drugs in an HIV-Infected Paradise, Malindi, and pretty horrible reading. As I said, the market actually clocked 1.014 billion shillings of turnover, heavy high-volume session. 10-year Eurobond as of yesterday was $6.13 to $6.06 yield, which I think is an important signifier for local interest rates, which will track international rates lower and support, in my view, the next leg higher of the Securities Exchange. All the commentaries of which wrap up, if you care to look. I think the market's headed higher. I think this period of circumspection will end, and it should end pretty soon, in my view. Once again, thank you for stopping by.